and let's talk about how you can basically do something throughout 2021 that's going to help you get through some hard times, but also help you maintain a attitude of gratitude. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about something that is in Joshua 4, and this is something that I actually learned through counseling. In case you guys don't know, or if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you know that I'm pretty open about my own struggles with things like anxiety, depression, and things like that. Of course, I am totally okay with counseling. Yeah, I think everybody that is struggling with mental health should check out counseling if something that they think they need. Here is what we're talking about in Joshua 4. This is after Joshua and the nation of Israel crossed over the Jordan, and Lord is telling Joshua, hey, take 12 men from the people from each tribe and command them, saying, take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan River, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight. That's kind of a weird request, right? It's like, God, why should we pick up these stones? Like, what are we doing with stones? This is okay, well, but we're gonna do it anyway. So then he says here that Joshua called the 12 men, and he said to them, hey, pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan. Take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you. Now, real quick, got to be some pretty big stones. They got to carry them on their shoulders. You know, anytime if you carry something heavy, use your shoulder to kind of help sustain the weight. So these stones are probably pretty hefty. And so he continues here and says, when your children ask in time to come, what do those stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. Here's something that I learned from my counselor. You read this, and they're clearly setting up these stones as a monument, a sort of teachable moment for their future generations to remind them of what God did and how God provided for them in this particular instance. And so as their kids grow up, they're going to hear this story, they're going to follow God, they're going to be like, okay, well, God brought us through in this situation here, and we're going to keep reminding people of this. And so God, or these generations, then are going to tell their next generations, and it's just going to be this cycle of teaching people, hey, this is what God did, this is what these stones mean, and here's what we need to remember because of these stones. And so something I learned in counseling is, as you go throughout the year, maybe don't take literal stones and stack them up in your backyard. Unless you want to, then go for it. But something that I learned was, when you're going through a really rough season or a rough day or a rough week, to sit down and write out some of the ways that God has provided for you, or has taken care of you, or has brought you out of something, or answered a need, whatever it is, and write it down in a journal, or if you use your phone a lot, maybe keep it in a note app like Evernote, or a reminder or something. Just put it in something that you're going to be able to pull up at a moment's notice and go back through and go, okay, God brought me through here, God answered this prayer, God did this here. So if he did all these things, he's not going to just abandon me here. And so if you do this, it's going to do a couple of different things. If you keep track of the ways that God has provided for you, it's going to do a couple different things for you. One, it's going to remind you that God is there with you. It's going to remind you that God is providing for you. The other thing it's going to do, it's going to help change your mindset. For those of us that deal with anxiety, it's real easy for us to get into what I call a downward spiral of thinking, where we think of one negative thought and then it compounds to another one and another, and pretty soon we're just buried underneath a big mountain of negative thinking. And so that skews our thinking, that skews our perspective, and that causes us to react in ways that are not appropriate. And so when we go back to this list, these memorial stones, or Thanksgiving stones as my pastor calls them, we remember that God is providing for us, but we also remember that things are not quite as bad as what they may seem at the moment. Because God has brought us through those situations and is going to carry us through His current ones, and this allows us to instill a sense of gratitude. And gratitude helps us in a lot of ways, because it helps us to be thankful for the things that we have, not worry about the things that we don't have. I know that's kind of easier said than done depending on the circumstance, but this practice here will help you in the new year. I almost said next year, but we're already in 2021. It's going to help you stay grateful for the things that you have, but also stay patient when God is maybe trying to teach you something, or you're going through a rough season. But that's just something that I think if we all took into this year, we're gonna come out a lot stronger because of it. So again, that was Joshua 4 verses 1 through 7 is what we went through. So definitely take note of that. Definitely try to do that this year. But basically, the short summary of it is to just write down things that God has done for you, how God has helped you, and refer back to that list later on. So that way you can kind of break that cycle of negative thinking, but you can also maintain that level of gratitude that you're going to need to make it through the as well. So there is that. I know for me personally, I've been more consistent about doing this lately, and it has helped immensely. Me being a pastor, there's a lot of times where I think that what I'm doing doesn't really matter, or it's not making much of a difference. And so kind of what I did one day, this was actually a couple days ago, I sat down and wrote that out in my journal. I was feeling like I'm not doing anything. I feel like a lot of the stuff that I am doing is having no effect. Why should I bother continuing a lot of the things that I'm doing? And a few hours later, I came back and said, you know what? I'm making a bigger difference than what I'm not seeing, if that makes sense. And so I just need to stay faithful, keep working hard, doing what I love. Hopefully that helps. And in case you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment down below with what you think, or maybe let's continue discussion. And if you are hanging out here in this morning on the chat, let's continue chatting it up. Let me switch over to the just chatting screen.